Welcome to the Charity Changemakers podcast, your weekly dose of inspiration and action for the changemakers of the world. Each week, we dive deep into the world of impactful charities. We connect you with the passionate leaders, the innovative ideas, and the real-world stories that are making a difference. Whether you're a seasoned non-profit professional or just starting out, this podcast is your chance to learn from the best and get fired up to make a positive change. We'll explore the challenges and triumphs of running a successful charity. We'll hear about the fundraising strategies, impactful programs, and the stories of the people whose lives are being transformed. But most importantly, we'll leave you feeling empowered and equipped to take action in your community and the organisations in which you work. So, buckle up, changemakers, because we're about to embark on a journey of inspiration and impact.
I'm joined today by Helen Denny, who's the Chief Executive of the Melting Pot based up in Edinburgh and working across Scotland. We're sharing a really interesting conversation. I think you're going to find lots of fascinating insights through the conversation that we have. Helen made a really interesting transition, actually, after pandemic, having done nearly a decade of working freelance and running her own business, made that transition back into a permanent position within the charity sector up at the Melting Pot. Lots of events, lots of different things that they're delivering and work that's going on, very creative, very innovative, and a real look about how flexible and a blended approach to work can really bring the best out of your organisation, out of your staff team, whilst always continuing to deliver the highest of services to your customer. You're going to learn loads through this conversation. So without any more from me, let's get on and meet our changemaker. Really pleased to be joined by Helen today. Thanks for joining us, Helen.
So you're very welcome. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, good. No, I really appreciate you giving us some time to come and to spend chatting to us here on the Charity Changemakers podcast, and the opportunity to learn a little bit more about you and your journey into the sector and what that's looked like in your time, obviously working within the charity sector. But Helen, we start all of these podcasts off with some quickfire questions, bit of an opportunity for the listeners, the audience, to get to know you a little bit. So tell us, where's the most interesting place you've ever visited?
Oh, I'm going to say Borneo. Do you want to know why?
Absolutely. Fill us in.
Yeah, I did 6 months there with a charity. They don't actually exist anymore, Rally International, but I did 6 months volunteering there as a project manager back in 2010, and just, absolutely amazing place. I think combined with the people I was with, but also just, really diverse landscape, people, community, beaches, mountains, jungle. Just really awesome.
Yeah, and you said you were volunteering out there with a charity. What type of work, volunteer work, were you doing out there?
So volunteer project manager. So they used to operate with sort of anyone over 25 could volunteer as a project manager. And then we were working with 17 to 24-year-olds who were doing a project out there for 3 or 6 months. So varied in terms of community, working in some quite remote communities, adventure phase, as well as environmental. I was trying to remember what the other so I was project manager, and I actually did quite a lot of trekking through the jungle, which was leading groups of young adults doing that, which was great.
Yeah, amazing. No, that's great. And second quickfire question coming at you then. What are you reading at the moment?
I am reading, and I've forgotten the title, so you can edit that bit out. It is a book about business, and I have totally forgotten the title, so that's really not very helpful.
Okay. But obviously it's having a great impact.
It's really interesting because it's around the kind of concept that the doing business is better to do it by giving instead of so the more we give, the more you get in the world of business. So it's actually a really interesting concept. I've just really totally got a blank on the title. Sorry.
Not a problem. Well, I will grab it from you after the call, and we'll put it in the show notes so that people can look it up. And then finally, outside of work, what do you like to do to relax?
Combination. I got a dog 3 months ago, so lots of dog walking, which is great. Means I get out a couple of times a day, and that's been quite good for exploring the local area, and a little bit of canoeing and riding my bike, kind of the main things. So yeah, mainly outdoorsy stuff, anything to be able to explore the kind of mountains, beaches, rural parts of Scotland where I live.
Yeah, brilliant, absolutely. So it all sounds very activity packed, which is brilliant. So yeah, lovely. Thank you for answering those. It's obviously good for us to get to know you a little bit more here on the podcast. But obviously, this podcast is all about finding out about people's route into the sector and how they've got to where they are, and influences that have been there upon that career journey, upon their lives. Differences that places and people have made. So tell us a little bit about your early route into the charity sector and what that looked like for yourself.
So route into the charity sector is pretty, I guess, a bit like lots of people. When I finished school at 18, which feels like a lifetime ago, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So instead of going straight to uni, I took a gap year and did some volunteering work with a charity, actually. And that was doing residential youth work back, many years ago. So it was kind of a full-time job where you got all your accommodation and food paid for. And I actually loved that experience. So I ended up volunteering with them for 3 years in different locations, up in Cheshire and then in Liverpool and then in London, working with young people, lots of focus on quite deprived areas in the different places that I was based, but really supporting young people in terms of personal development. So that really is what probably got me into working within the charity sector initially, was through that experience as a young adult myself. And from that, I then went to uni to do a degree in youth and community studies, and then worked mainly for charities, a brief stint with local authority, but didn't really like all the how long it took to get anything done in the public sector, which anyone who works in the public sector will know. Did a lot of work within the charity sector for sort of 20 odd years, mainly working with young people in that kind of youth and personal development space in a whole variety of different roles and different locations. So that's really what started my journey into the charity sector, and sort of progressed through in terms of sort of, up the ladder, if you like, into senior management, and then ran away from it all in 2010 when I went to Borneo. I guess I suppose it was quite interesting coming back after that 6 months of being away and being like, I still want to do something, but I didn't want to just be stuck back in the office, because I think the more you progressed, I was quite desk-based prior to going to Borneo, and I wanted to get back to that being out and about with people, which is something that I love doing. So that's when I kind of went off on that trajectory of setting up my own business, which I'm probably jumping ahead.
No, it's interesting. I was really interested there because, I mean, obviously we haven't talked about this beforehand, but whether that Borneo was kind of a bit of a reset moment, like you say, kind of progression into sort of senior management, that potentially taking you away from that early experience of that frontline delivery. I mean, was it that sense of a bit of a reset at that point?
Yeah, I think so. I think, the reason I got into working in the charity sector and working with young people initially, and then young adults, was because I love being in and around and supporting people. And as I progressed, and I was like, actually, I was spending more, probably 80% of my time, you started being stuck behind a desk or worrying about funding or managing people. And it was like, actually, I knew that I needed to make a change. So Borneo was a real opportunity for me just to press pause, to reconnect a little bit with time for myself. Even though I was volunteering for a charity overseas, it was still about me having a bit of an adventure at the same time, and gave me that time and space out of that kind of day-to-day that I was doing. At the time, I was working in Tower Hamlets in East London. So it was completely different from Tower Hamlets to moving overseas for a few months into the jungle. And it gave me a real opportunity just to get a bit of perspective and to really think around what made me tick and what made me excited, and why had I gone into the sector and worked with young people in the first place. And then that helped me kind of think around what was going to come next, and what I needed to do to get there. So yeah, it was definitely a kind of press pause moment.
And sometimes you need to do that, don't you? Sort of, you know, take yourself out of a scenario, or be able to step back and see that bigger picture as to what's coming next, what's happening, you know, where the future lies. And particularly, I think for individuals, and we've heard this consistently across the podcast, I think over the last few weeks, is that, you know, people in the sector that come in have you know, navigated quickly through their careers and been able to take promotion and find themselves in senior roles quite quickly, where they've obviously performed well, and you know, that approach to their work has been seen by trustees, by hiring managers, from that entry role in the frontline delivery, suddenly doing something quite different, and just having that time, I guess, to have a bit of perspective on the future. So having done that, having taken that time, what did come next?
So I got back from the jungle back in 2011, and I had no money, because I was obviously with Rally, you fundraise to go away, and then it was a bit like, maybe I need to find a job. So I actually ended up going back into a job for a brief stint for about, I think it was 18 months, maybe slightly longer, with a organisation that was part of the National Citizen Service that still exists, but it's slightly different to how it was back then. So again, that charity doesn't exist anymore. It seems to be a theme. I sort of seem to leave and then they go, nothing to do with me. But yeah, so I worked with an organisation called The Challenge for about 18 months. And actually it was a managerial role with them. What was quite interesting was I was much more out and about back in the community, supporting an absolutely amazing team, actually, where we worked across East London, delivering programs for young people throughout the summer of the Olympics, which was an experience, trying to navigate getting young people from different locations across the boroughs of East London during the middle of the biggest event London's probably seen for a long time. But during that time with them, I knew when I got back from Borneo that I didn't really want to be back in a full-time job. So I saw that as a bit of an interlude. And actually I started exploring that option of becoming self-employed. So during the time I worked with them, I was kind of having lots of conversations and building up a little bit more of a network so that I could step into doing my own thing, essentially, and having that little bit more flex and freedom to pick and choose and get back to doing some of the work that I loved, which was that frontline, as well as take on some new opportunities through doing training and development and other areas like that. So yeah, it was a bit of a kind of into that job, and then from that I went on to set up my own business, which was the next 10 years in terms of after I finished with The Challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of, I guess, where our paths crossed, going back a few years ago now, where, obviously part of the Lucidity, give Lucidity Network a shout out here. And actually Lucy, who heads up Lucidity Network's got a new podcast as well. So that's also worth a listen. Our paths crossed there, where you were leading training, facilitating, coaching, and some group work going on there. So yeah, talk us about that journey then, whilst you were running your own business. So talk us about that journey into freelance, into self-employed, into building a business, and the types of work that you undertook there, and again, I guess a real range of clients, right?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, obviously I got back, I knew I wanted to do something different. I kind of did that at the job temporarily, and then I leaped into the world of self-employment back in early 2013, and probably the first 6 months of that was going and just taking all the work, but again predominantly with sort of charity clients, third sector, and they were doing a real mix in terms of initially sort of training and development leadership programs with people who were looking to take young people or equivalent overseas, some sort of direct delivery again with particular projects. So I did something working with a a charity that worked with street children globally, and got to have a couple of brilliant sort of projects with them where we got to go out to Rio supporting a couple of their international programs. But then I guess through those initial few months of starting out on the freelance journey, actually and I think other freelancers will probably know this, back when I started, there wasn't as many people who were self-employed. I think since then, I can't remember the stats, but it's massively increased in recent years. I think it's a direct result partly of the pandemic, but it felt quite lonely. I suddenly was like, oh, I don't have a team around me anymore. And I actually left what was a brilliant organization and team. So that led me to setting up Not 9 to 5, which is obviously, as you mentioned, where our paths crossed. And that was really initially the concept was around creating a network of support for other freelancers, for having learning events, opportunities to come together, share experiences, learn from each other, and build that team, if you like, that you don't actually have when you're a freelancer. Over the next couple of years, that evolved into, because I was working with so many people within that Not 9 to 5 space, we offered not only training and development for freelancers, we also started working with businesses to help them in that kind of flexible world of work, where it was around how you create great teams, great cultures in a more flexible, not 9 to 5 world. And that was, really interesting, just working with a whole range of different clients, from tiny, small organizations right through to bigger third sector, larger charities that, work across the UK. Quite interesting, I think, because up until the pandemic, whilst people were definitely moving and operating a more blended outside of the 9 to 5 way, I think it was when the pandemic hit that really accelerated that shift into working more flexibly, understanding the value that freelancers can bring into sort of creating these blended teams. And I think, it was quite interesting. I think it was when the pandemic hit, my parents were like, oh, now we understand what you actually do. So up until that point, they were like, we're not really sure what you do. But for me, that 10 years of running Not 9 to 5 was a real opportunity, I suppose, to think about bringing all my different strengths that I'd got and the knowledge and skills and experience from the previous sort of 20 years in the sector, and bring that into my own business and work in a way that suited me. I've never really been a Monday to Friday 9 to 5 person, and being able to run an organization that was embedded in those sort of principles of flexible working, but creating great cultures and supporting people who work for themselves was a real privilege. And I really loved it. And obviously, as you mentioned, Lucy, good shout out to Lucy. It was really nice to connect with her on that journey. And we started running our learning events together for a good few years until recently, when I stepped out from running my own business. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we'll definitely get to that. And I just wonder, when we talk about the Not 9 to 5 network, and also the work that you were doing pre-pandemic, and that, that I guess working in a space where we weren't all as flexible, like you say, with blended working or hybrid working, and trying to introduce that. Were you in the right place at the right time when pandemic hit? I mean, was there an increase in that? I guess that people wanting to work with you, or then supporting other organisations? What did it was kind of like, blimey, this is a real opportunity.
Yeah, it's actually really interesting because I know we'll talk about it, but as the pandemic hit, it was really interesting in terms of the number of events that we started to offer. The more we were offering more consultancy with different clients, so there was definitely an increase in terms of people wanting to work with us and understand it. But actually, I think it's probably post-pandemic and in the last 2 years where organisations have now really got the time and space to think about it properly. Whilst there was definitely an increase in conversations and people interested in knowing that this is the way the world of work is going. Lots of people know this, but the larger organisations, and actually to some extent in the third sector, I think people were a bit slower to introduce some of those kind of practices and policies and processes. And to get it right, there's a big investment that's needed into supporting your middle managers, because actually for blended teams and hybrid teams to work really well, you need to really invest in that middle management who are having to manage the people who are sometimes at home, sometimes in the office. Not, you're not seeing everyone all at the same time like you used to, and trying to work out what does that look like in this new world of work. So I think we definitely saw an increase. But actually, I think it wasn't an overnight, like, oh, right, we're all going to book in and suddenly get some, ask for some consultancy work. Because, well, it takes time for it. Because I think, I don't know about you, but for me, I was like, oh, it'll all go back to normal for some, for the pandemic. People were like, oh, it'll be over in 2 weeks. I think with some people, it was the same with the return to the office. And even now, there's still this debate, isn't there, around, is it working, hybrid working, and it's.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
And I think that's a really interesting observation, because I guess in that first year, that 2020 year, you had to do it, didn't you? You were forced into it, had to do it, and I guess there was always that thought about, well, it will return to normal. I think a lot of our clients, a lot of people that I'm talking with, are now, like you say, wrestling with, well, what does hybrid and blended working look for us when we've got an office in London or Birmingham or Edinburgh, but now we've recruited much wider than our local patch. How do we build team in that sense? But like you're right, they probably haven't had the headspace to explore what that looks like until now, really. And how to get that right.
Yeah, and I think it's really, it's such an interesting space. Like, I have no doubt that we're not going to go back to the office. Like, I knew that pre-pandemic, and I knew that system, that change was coming. And now I think people are moving into that acceptance that, okay, this is a new way of working. But I guess, like anything, when we went to working in the office, however many years ago, there was probably a period of change that people went through then, and that takes time to adapt to that new normal. And I think that's where we're at now, is people sort of figuring their way through this and working out, okay, what do we need to still stay connected, have that really good workplace culture. But I mean, flexibility is absolutely key, I think, for especially the generation who makes me sound really old, but are coming into the workplace now. It's you'll know this as a recruiter, but it's one of the biggest things people ask for now in that space is that flexibility, jobs with purpose. So it's probably more important to some extent than the higher salary. So I think I still stay connected with an organisation up here that I've done a bit of work with, and it's just, really interesting to sort of touch base with them and to see kind of what the trends are for them. But I think it's an interesting place to be in, and something I definitely still keep an eye on, having been involved in it. And obviously now working in an organisation where we have shifted to a 4-day working week and a very flexible working model for the team to reflect that shift that exists.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right. That shift is definitely there, and particularly for people coming into sector, or even those that were within sector. I think, we've run numerous polls on LinkedIn over the last 12 months where, candidates are telling to us that, flexibility, you're right, is far more important to them than salary. Of course, we've all still got bills to pay, and, salaries need to be at the right level. And I don't think the sector's kept up necessarily as well as best as it can. But flexibility is always coming out on top, which is really interesting. And Helen, as I reflect, and we've kind of picked up a little bit on the conversation as we've talked about. I mean, actually, you made after pandemic, you made that change from having been working in freelance for a decade to go into a permanent position. And that happened at a time when actually, the majority of, or a lot of people that I was talking to, were making the shift the other way. That were going from permanent positions and going again into freelance. Like you say, there's a lot more freelance consultants, type individuals around in the market now and in the last couple of years. But you went the other way. So I'd be interested to find out what kind of stirred that decision, what was it that led to that move into the chief executive role now at the Melting Pot?
Yeah, it's a very good question that I've been asked many a time over the last couple of years. So obviously I got offered, I've been talking with the board at the Melting Pot back in September 2022 around they knew that the founder of the Melting Pot was planning to step down and they wanted somebody to step into that chief exec role. Just for context, I'd already been a member of their space, having used it when I relocated to Scotland. I'd worked with them on a freelance basis for a good couple of years, helping them with the development of their incubator program for social businesses. When they approached me, it was quite an interesting decision to go, my business actually was, on a upward trajectory. I can't say that word. To some extent, as we've talked around, there was a growing demand for that consultancy, that support for businesses moving into the flexible and not 9-to-5 space. But at the same time, I think that opportunity to take on a chief exec role with an organization that I was really passionate about felt almost like too good an opportunity to turn down. I think I would have really struggled to say yes to many permanent jobs, but with the Melting Pot as that centre for social innovation, I could see real opportunities in terms of what we could become. But also for me, it was a real opportunity to bring in some of that knowledge and experience that I gained for 10 years and running my own business, but to step back into a place where I had a wider team around me. Running your own business can be lonely at times, especially it was just me as the business owner. I brought in freelancers as needed and obviously did events with Lucy, but otherwise, on a day-to-day basis, you are everything within a business. And I think for me, I recognized that I needed a bit more, and to have that team up and that additional support that I would get by taking a chief exec role felt like the right move. I think there was a real alignment in terms of the Melting Pot, in terms of what they're trying to do in that space. So we're operating in terms of social innovation, which in simple terms is about creating that positive impact for people and planet. And through the work we do, whether it's running the kind of incubator, so that learning program for people starting out on a social business journey, to offering a space, a community with learning events, right through to the consultancy where we're working with other organizations. Actually, on paper, when you start to break it down, there's a real alignment with what I was doing with my own business anyway. And then we're obviously trying to be quite innovative, if it's possible in this day and age to be innovative, but we're trying to kind of demonstrate by role modeling different ways of working within a sector that actually people are often understaffed, don't have enough capacity, aren't paying necessarily the staff at the right level. So we've brought in some good practices. I mentioned things like we've moved to the 4-day working week. I think that really aligns with some of the work I was doing previously, and demonstrating that actually you can still deliver on your purpose and make an impact, but also in a way you can do it in a way where you still look after the people that are, making that happen, if you like. So I think, lots of things came into that decision. But it wasn't an overnight one. It was a 6-month wrestling and back and forth, and having to really decide, because I knew the reality was, once I took on a chief exec role, you're never going to be able to continue with running a business on the side, as much as some people like. I can still keep my hand in with a little bit of freelance work and the odd bit of training here and there, but I had to make a decision, and so it felt in some ways the right time for that opportunity. But also, I think for me, what I was also noticing, and we've sort of alluded to this, there was a lots of organisations now springing up and operating in that space of supporting businesses to become more flexible, work in a less 9-to-5 way. So it felt like actually even if we're not here, there's plenty of other people around who are supporting organisations. And not that we were the only ones doing it before, but it felt quite timely to step aside and do something different. It won't be forever, and I'm okay saying that publicly. So I've always had the kind of next thing in the distance that I'll be working towards, and my board know that as well. But I think I was the right chief exec to come in at a time when the founder was leaving. I think it's a difficult role to step into with the founder exiting, and I think for the founder, it was important. It was somebody she knew as well, that she trusted, who could take on the next stage of development for the melting pot. But when we go global, it'll be somebody else.
We'll hear more about that in a moment. But I guess I'm interested in that. You talk about the innovative, the creative ways, the different ways in which and ideas that you've brought into the melting pot and different ways of working. I guess the 4-day week is something that's been on people's radars for a long time. And again, it's conversations that I have with clients all the time. And, from people who go, well, we just don't know how we might make it work, or it wouldn't work for us. Or just the whole thought of it is just a bit of a headache. I mean, how's that? Talk us through that journey and what it's looked like for you and the team.
To be honest, it's not been as difficult as we thought it would be. I think we were overthinking it at the beginning. So when I came into post and I worked really closely with my chief operating officer, Jenny, and it was something we wanted to bring in as an additional benefit. We try and pay well for our staff, but ultimately we're still a social enterprise. We don't have loads of excess money to pay big bucks, so it's like, what else can we offer our staff that's a real benefit, that's going to keep them engaged and happy, but also reflect that we need that better balance, I think, between work and life. So we looked at different ways of doing it, and actually we had a bit of in part sort of informal advice from Autonomy, who actually head up the 4-day working week campaign, and they were just like, well, just give it a go. And actually it was, they said a bit more than that, obviously, but that was the kind of premise. And actually they were right. It was like, we're overthinking this, let's just give it a go. So we spoke with quite a small team. There's only 7 of us. So we had a conversation around how it would work. So for those who obviously don't know the melting pot, we are open to our customers 5 days a week, Monday to Friday, from 8:30 to 5:30. So it wasn't as simple as, we'll just close on a Friday. So we actually did it on a kind of what worked for each individual in the team. And then put a lot of trust into them to navigate the rota that they manage for being around for when the customers are in. So some of the team have a Monday off, some of the team have a Friday off. Some of the team work 5 days, but shorter days, because that worked better for them with their sort of, they've got a toddler and they wanted to actually just do shorter days so they can spend more time doing sort of pickups and drop-offs from nursery. And then as a senior management team, we kind of all operate slightly differently. So it's actually been on a kind of one by individual basis. So recognizing one size doesn't fit all. And actually, we're nearly a year into working as a 4-day working week, and we definitely are not going back. So it's made a massive difference, I think, that shift in the time you get back for your own sort of personal projects and, life. But also you can really see how much the team have benefited from having that additional time. So it's been a real sort of well-being benefit as well for the team, and it hasn't impacted on our customers at all. Some logistics to work out with rotas and things like that, but I think putting the trust in the team to do that, and they've risen to that challenge. So I think that's been really important as part of that process. So I think those principles of trust and talking about it, and also having kind of review points along the way to say, okay, is there anything we need to tweak on this to make it work better?
Absolutely. And I think those opportunities to offer things towards an individual's well-being is something that the charity sector can compete on. Like you say, can't always compete on salary, but actually when it comes down to being able to compete on whether it's giving organisations that give days for people to have volunteer days, so they can go and many people choose obviously to be trustees in that space, to, like you say, 4-day weeks, or we work with a number of clients that sort of do a 9-day fortnight. Those types of things around the flexibility are just so important for people as they navigate their way through career and choosing to work within the sector, and how it can give back. So no, that's really helpful.
I find it really interesting as well. Like, we recently took on a business development manager, and she said to me, actually within the first couple of months, when she saw us advertise, that was one of the kind of perks, was this sort of 4-day working week or a 30-hour working week for the same salary. We don't obviously reduce salary. She was like, I kind of thought that was probably just the thing you said, but you don't really do, and that everyone actually works more than the 30 hours. And I think, yes, of course, as anyone will know, in a sort of senior role, there is some weeks where, undoubtedly you end up doing a little bit more, but actually as a team, we really push those boundaries and say, okay, you have worked extra this week, I need you to take that time back. And I think she's reflected, having come from a different organisation where she was doing a crazy amount of hours, just how refreshing it is to be able to say, actually, I'm going to take Thursday off because I have worked too many hours last week, and I'm going to go and walk up a mountain, as she tries to tick off the Munros in Scotland. So I think, those boundaries and actually role modelling that as a senior leader is really important. I won't go on to a rant about how, in my view, in the sector, there's too many people doing too much, and often we're doing more than one person's job, and actually we'll never see change in the sector if we don't start kind of role modelling good practice and demonstrating it's okay to have boundaries and to say no, and be like, actually, I don't have capacity all the time to do more than what I'm doing. I think that's important.
Helen, I went quiet there. I just wanted you to rant away. This is the space. Go for it. No, but I mean, I wonder whether when you reflect on your own leadership style, but also as you mentioned, someone there in your business development role. When they go and they take that time, and they've got that time to go up the mountain, or you've got time to take the new puppy for a walk, or go out in the kayak. Actually, I know there is a bit of that, you are switching off, but there's also some of that big picture thinking, a bit like your Borneo moment. There's some of that big picture happening on a weekly basis, isn't there?
Yeah, 100%. Like, the months where I've had to work too much for whatever reason, deadlines, projects, funding, deadlines, we've all been there. You're just not performing your best. It's like, actually, because I'm too knackered, and we've all worked in roles like that where that's just kind of, and it's the norm. And actually, the minute you put space back into your working week or into your working month, the difference you feel by just being able to step out, as you say, go for a walk with the dog, or climb a mountain, or read a good book, even if you can't remember the title of it. It's it makes a huge difference. And I come back into work and I feel more focused, and suddenly you will have those light bulb moments. We're redeveloping a part of the business at the moment, and I think when we're in it, we're kind of grappling with it and we can't quite make sense of it. But the minute I've taken some time out, which I have just done recently, I had a few days away cycling in the Hebrides on a holiday, and I've just come back and brain dumped everything. I didn't talk about work once, but it's interesting how it was just there and sat, and it was percolating, and actually it's much clearer now what we can do with this particular aspect of the business. So I do think, that space, time, boundaries, so important, and actually not embedded or talked about enough in cultures, in workplaces, or in the third sector in particular. Because people are often driven by the purpose and the cause of what they're trying to, deliver on. So we always think by giving more of ourselves, we're going to make more of an impact. But actually, what impact can we make if we are burnt out, or our staff team are exhausted and stressed? We're not going to be delivering the same level of impact because, we're too knackered. And people leave the sector.
Like you say, often people are doing more than one job, aren't they, as well? And I think, that word percolated made me smile as you use it. It's a word that our associate director here at Charisma, Catherine, uses a lot, and is one that we've been able to introduce, I think, over the last few years since she joined us. Because again, feeling busy at capacity, small team, lots of things coming at you, cogs feels like they're constantly turning, but actually, the importance of that stepping back and letting things percolate. It's a word that we sometimes joke about here, but actually there's something really important in it, and making that space and that time.
Yeah, I found it was really interesting recently. I did a leadership retreat back it's the end of March. So it was coming to the end of the financial year. We just delivered on a funded project, coming to the end of that. And so it had been a really busy time. And I was a bit like, oh God, why have I signed up for 4 days retreating? I was exhausted. But actually, it was so interesting because it wasn't with any third sector. I was the only third sector person there. Everyone else was in the private sector who are all sort of scaling their businesses. We've got quite a big startup ecosystem up here. And I just found it really refreshing to be with other leaders who really valued and really helped me go, it's okay to just spend time thinking, and this is work. You can still put this time against your timesheet, because actually thinking and walking and having a conversation with somebody is helping you in terms of development of the business. And I think quite often as leaders in the sector, well, in every business, I think it's really easy to get do the doing all the time and not have that kind of time to think strategically and do the thinking that is required for businesses to grow. And so I think it's something we should start finding a way to embed as good practice, and making time for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And what have been the results that you've seen at the Melting Pot in the time that you've been there? I mean, obviously, and how the organisation had been through change or new services. I mean, you talked about potentially new projects. Yeah, and I guess how have you found that transition then from freelance? And I guess from going from project to project to project to this is me and this is where I am, and I guess being there on the journey and seeing things through into that delivery as well.
Yeah, it's been really interesting space. So I've been 18 months officially in post as chief exec, but was doing sort of a part-time role for 6 months in the run up to that, which was essentially not on paper the title, but was doing the chief exec role. And I think what's been really interesting is the shift that we've been making as an organisation. So the Melting Pot has been around for 17 years. It's really well known in Edinburgh for the co-working element of what we do, which is that shared workspace, that community, those events, supporting people within the social innovation space. But actually, we're meant to be this centre for social innovation, which for me is much more than just co-working. So actually in the last 18 months, we've been doing a huge amount of work around, developing a new strategy to be much clearer on where we're going and what we're doing as that centre for social innovation. We're scaling as a business, so looking at how we partner further afield across Scotland in different localities to create sort of, I guess, satellite hubs to some extent with different partners who are wanting to create similar places with purpose, but in their own locality. So that's been a big part of what we've been working on. Developing our events program. I know you came up recently for one of our events, and I think that's been massive in terms of just doing really good members events. We're also shifting into doing really good public inspiring events, but really sort of hopefully trying to challenge some of the status quo around how events are done, but also what we're talking about at those events. So that event series around bridging communities was really important, around stepping out of our silos and, that kind of working with others who are different from ourselves and understanding what we can learn and how we can take action through that to make real change on the ground, back in our own systems, our own communities. And the other parts of what I'm, I guess, again, quite excited around is, we're developing the consultancy arm of the business. It's had various configurations over the years, but it finally feels like it's becoming something that it's got real potential to really make a difference and really set us apart as that centre for social innovation. And that isn't about us having to do the social innovation, but us supporting others across Scotland to make that real change in their own localities where they're best placed. They know their communities and the issues there, but we can support them with some of the tools and the knowledge and expertise that as a team and through our members that we've kind of gained and gathered over the years. I think the other part of your question was, how does it feel different from a freelance role? Ironically, it doesn't in some ways. And I don't know if that's just the nature of the melting pot, but we have so many different projects and different arms of the business. It has almost felt like a bit like a freelance role in the sense that I've had quite a lot of different projects just to get stuck into, but I've actually got some additional support, and you're like, oh, that's quite nice. I don't have to do the marketing bit, because actually I've got someone who can help me with that instead of trying to do it all yourself when you're running a business on your own. So yeah, in some ways it hasn't felt too big a shift from being self-employed to taking on a chief exec. It's nice to have a board of directors that you can get that impartial advice and support from that I didn't have previously. It's nice to have a team you can delegate things to. They probably hate it when I do it, but I'm pretty good at delegating. And it's nice, I think, I guess the difference is from running your own business to suddenly being responsible for an organization that already exists is that, I'm really passionate about the organization, but what I really am enjoying is being able to go, okay, this is our strategy that we developed. And this is where we want to get it to. And almost knowing in my head, it's like, right, by this time in my kind of plan, I'd like us to have reached this kind of point, and then I know I can pass it on to someone else. And having that sort of vision and working towards that is something I'm really enjoying as well, and keeping the team with us along the way. And as an organisation, I'd say they were never had enough capacity. So it's been really nice over the last 18 months just to work with the team to slightly restructure and just get us to a better place where they all feel like they're being looked after and they're actually not overworked all the time, which it touched on can be commonplace within the sector.
So it's been a bit of an inward look in some of those structures, those policies, those ways of working, but also obviously what we're also seeing, what I'm seeing is there's more outward facing stuff coming out of the melting pot.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And, if you look at our strategy, in year one, it was all around, okay, one of our priorities is that long-term sustainability, and that has to be inward looking, because for us to be sustainable, we have to have really good foundations in place. And that's everything from your budgets to what we're charging to actually if we got the right staff in the right roles. So we've been doing a lot of work on that. But yeah, those are the strategic priorities around that scaling piece in terms of our impact and that community-driven innovation. That's what we're now starting to really get to dig into and focus on as well. And it's in a climate, well, as we all know, it's not an easy climate to operate in at the moment within the sector for lots of reasons, but it's been, as much as it's hard work, it's been quite enjoyable trying to innovate and think creatively around how do we do more with this brilliant sort of business to create that real impact for people and planet up here in Scotland. So yeah, it has been a bit of inward looking, but now we're definitely starting to shift that, and it's been good in terms of feedback. People are noticing that shift. We're trying to move that trajectory of, oh, that's a co-working space in Edinburgh. It's definitely starting to hear a bit of a shift where people are recognising that we're much more than that, and that's really important for us in terms of what we want to achieve.
Yeah, indeed, and definitely as an independent punter who came along to one of your events, if you can go on the Melting Pot website, look at the different things that they've got going on and coming up, because from an event point of view, incredibly creative, very innovative, very interactive, lots of takeaways for me on that day. That it's only a day event, but I think I came away with a few different things that we introduced into the life of life of Charisma, you know, off the back of that. I mean, podcast partly, that stirring to get on and to do it is a project we've been talking about for a long time, and there's a bit of that sense of, well, let's just get on and do it. But also, I was really challenged on long form writing actually at the event, and the importance of long form writing in working in remote teams actually, and that stirred some different ways of working here at Charisma, things that we're exploring and implementing as well. So definitely go along to the Melting Pot website and have a look as to what's going on. And Helen, I don't really give anybody any pre-warning as to questions that I'm going to ask or things that come up, so slightly ever so on the spot here. But if you were to, you know, reflect on your career journey that you've been on, if you were able at this point now to give yourself a bit of advice, you know, at the very start of your career, I guess, as you were going on those gap year, you know, those gap years, or you reflect on things that you've learned, you go, actually, that's just something that's so important to my journey through in my career in the charity sector so far. What do you think that one piece, or it might even be a piece of advice that you've been given by someone? What is it? What's that nugget that might be helpful for people that are listening?
I might have more than one. The one that always springs to mind is something that somebody actually said to me very early on in my career around leadership. She was my manager at the time when I was working in Liverpool for a charity, and I was a new manager, so I had a small team of people that I was line managing, and it was actually one of the best pieces of advice around leadership. She said, if you're really effective as a leader, you should reach a point where your team don't need you, and actually won't notice when you're gone. And I was like, oh, and that's quite interesting for your own personal ego. But actually, when you reflect on that, and which I have done and I've come back to it time and time again, that was quite thought-provoking in that actually it's about creating an environment and a workplace where the people that I am managing or leading actually are empowered, and I'm trusting them to develop so that they can step into the role that I might be doing and I can move on. So I think it's something around that was, it's not maybe a nugget of advice, but it's something to really think about if you are a leader in the space, is what kind of leadership are you demonstrating, and what's that culture you're creating for the people who are coming up after you. And the other one is actually to do less and have better boundaries, because I have in no way was I'm much better now, but back in the day I have absolutely been that 60 hours a week and cancelled on friends and not done things because of work was too important, and it's taken me a long time, but in the last few years I think I've really recognised the value of having some really clear boundaries, saying no more, and stopping and taking that time out, whatever that looks like, walking the dog, thinking in a field. So whatever works for you, but I think, that would be definitely the biggest piece of advice I give to a younger me, is it's okay to say no and to have some good boundaries in place to take that time.
Perfect. No, that's great. And Helen, so incredibly grateful for you sharing that with us and coming on the podcast today. Obviously, when we put things out, we'll if you're happy, we'll tag you on LinkedIn. I'm sure there might be questions that people might want to ask or find out more about the Melting Pot. Are you happy that they sort of contact you that way? Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely fine. Yeah, feel free to tag me on all the social media, and I will find you the book link as well.
Yes, do. Yeah, absolutely. The title of the book we'll make sure is in the show notes.
Yeah, it's on my Kindle on my phone, which is just over there. So I'll go and get it, and I'll send it over.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. And Helen, it's been brilliant to have you on the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. And I look forward to catching up again soon to hear how things have progressed even further.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Adam.
And that's a wrap for this week on the Charity Changemakers podcast. Remember, you can be the change you want to see in the world. We hope that this episode has inspired you to get out there and make a difference. This podcast was brought to you by Charisma Charity Recruitment, one of the UK's leading recruitment consultancies for the charity sector. Whether you're a passionate professional seeking your next challenge or a charity searching for a top-tier talent, Charisma Charity Recruitment can help. Visit their website at charismarecruitment.co.uk to explore their latest positions and to connect your organisation with the changemakers shaping the future of the non-profit world. Thanks for joining us.